Montana Territory, 1875. The harsh winter wind howled across the rugged landscape, swirling snow around the solitary figure of Adam Thornton as he stood at the freshly dug grave. At 24, he had already seen more hardship than most men twice his age. The small wooden cross before him marked the final resting place of his mother, Sarah Thornton, who had succumbed to pneumonia after a brutal winter on their struggling ranch. "I promise, Ma," Adam whispered, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "I'll keep the ranch going. I'll make something of it, just like Pa wanted before the war took him." The brim of his worn cowboy hat shielded his eyes from the glare of the snow, but nothing could shield his heart from the crushing weight of solitude that pressed down upon him. Adam was a striking figure despite his grief, tall and broad-shouldered with golden-brown hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. His clean-shaven face was tanned from long days in the saddle, with eyes the color of a summer sky that seemed at odds with the hardness they now held. Those eyes had once crinkled easily with laughter, but that had been before the war, before his father's death, and now before losing his mother. The promise he'd made to her deathbed still echoed in his mind. "Keep the ranch, Adam. Don't let go of your father's dream, but promise me you'll find happiness too." Adam had nodded, though he couldn't imagine how happiness figured into the harsh reality of ranching in Montana Territory. The frontier was no place for soft emotions like happiness or love. It was a place for survival, for grit, for the kind of stubborn determination that kept a man working from dawn till dusk without complaint. Love was a luxury he couldn't afford, not when every season threatened to be their last on the struggling Thornton ranch. His mother had loved his father fiercely, and what had it gotten her? Years of loneliness after he died at Gettysburg, followed by the slow, grinding work of trying to keep their small ranch afloat. No, Adam concluded as he turned his back on the grave and trudged through knee-deep snow toward the small ranch house. The frontier demanded everything a man had just to survive. There was no room for love in that equation. Spring came reluctantly to the Montana Territory that year, as if winter was loath to release its grip. By April, however, the snow had finally receded, and Adam found himself in the nearby town of Silver Creek, purchasing supplies and seeking to hire a ranch hand or two for the coming season. The general store was busy that afternoon, filled with ranchers and townsfolk stocking up after the long winter. Adam waited patiently at the counter while Mr. Peterson tallied his order. "Need anything else, Adam?" the storekeeper asked, his pencil poised over the ledger. "Just some coffee if you've got it," Adam replied, his voice low and steady. "And if you hear of anyone looking for work, send them my way. I could use an extra hand or two." "Actually," Mr. Peterson began, but was interrupted by the store's door swinging open, bringing with it a gust of spring air and a young woman who seemed to embody the season itself. She was perhaps 20 years old, with hair the color of honey that caught the sunlight streaming through the windows. Her blue calico dress, though simple, was neatly pressed, and she moved with a graceful confidence that drew the eye of every person in the store. What struck Adam most, however, were her eyes, warm brown and direct, without a trace of the coyness that so many young women affected. "Miss Lockhart," Mr. Peterson greeted her warmly, "your order came in yesterday. I've got it all ready for you." "Thank you, Mr. Peterson," she replied with a smile that transformed her already pretty face into something truly beautiful. "I appreciate you holding it for me." As she waited, she glanced around the store, her gaze eventually landing on Adam. There was no flirtation in her look, just an open curiosity that made him unexpectedly self-conscious of his trail-worn appearance. "Miss Lockhart just took over teaching at the schoolhouse," Mr. Peterson explained to Adam. "Came all the way from Boston last fall." "Diana Lockhart," she said, extending her hand to Adam in a forthright manner that surprised him. "And you are." For a moment, Adam simply stared at her outstretched hand, unaccustomed to such directness from a woman. Then, removing his hat, he took her hand briefly. "Adam Thornton, ma'am. I ranch about 10 miles west of town." "Mr. Thornton was just saying he needs hired help," Mr. Peterson interjected. "As it happens," Diana said, "my brother is arriving from Boston next week. He's been looking to learn ranching. Perhaps you might consider him." Adam hesitated. An Easterner with no experience would be more trouble than help. "Ranch work is hard, Miss Lockhart. Not something a city man could take to easily." Diana's chin lifted slightly. "Daniel served 4 years in the war, Mr. Thornton. He's no stranger to hard work or hardship." The mention of the war shifted something in Adam. He'd been 16 when he'd lied about his age to join the Union Army in '67, fighting in the last months of the conflict, and then helping with Reconstruction. He'd seen enough to know that the war had forged men in ways that couldn't be explained. "Have him come see me when he arrives," Adam conceded. As he paid for his supplies and loaded them onto his wagon, Adam found himself glancing back at the schoolteacher more than once. There was something about her directness, her obvious intelligence, that intrigued him despite himself, but he pushed the thought away. The last thing he needed was to be distracted by a pretty face when his entire focus needed to be on making the ranch profitable. The promise to his mother weighed heavily on him as he clicked to the horses and headed back toward home. Keep the ranch, find happiness. As if those two things weren't mutually exclusive in this unforgiving territory. A week later, Adam was mending fence on the north pasture when he heard the approach of horses. Straightening, he shaded his eyes against the spring sunshine and saw two riders approaching, a man and a woman. As they drew closer, he recognized Diana Lockhart, her honey-colored hair braided and tucked beneath a sensible hat. Beside her rode a young man who bore a strong resemblance to her, though his face was marked by a jagged scar that ran from his right temple to his jaw. "Mr. Thornton," Diana called as they approached, "I hope we're not disturbing your work. This is my brother, Daniel." The young man dismounted smoothly and extended his hand. "Daniel Lockhart. My sister says you might be looking for help." Adam shook his hand, noting the firm grip and the calluses that belied Diana's description of him as a city man. "Adam Thornton. How much experience do you have with cattle?" "None," Daniel admitted frankly, "but I'm a quick learner and not afraid of long hours." Adam studied him thoughtfully. The scar told its own story, as did the way the man held himself, alert but easy in his own skin, the way men who'd seen combat often were. "I can't pay much," Adam warned. "Ranch isn't turning much profit yet, but there's a cabin for hands and meals included." "That's fair," Daniel nodded. "When would you want me to start?" "Now's as good a time as any," Adam replied. "If your sister can spare you." Diana, who had remained mounted, smiled down at them. "I've secured lodgings in town. Daniel doesn't need to stay with me." "Then it's settled," Adam said, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction. "You can start by helping me finish this fence, and then we'll see about getting you settled in the cabin." As Daniel retrieved his belongings from his horse, Diana dismounted and approached Adam. "Thank you for giving him a chance," she said quietly. "The war left him changed. He needs purpose again." Adam nodded, understanding more than she knew. Most men do after something like that. "Will you be coming to town for the spring social next Saturday?" Diana asked, changing the subject. "The school board is holding it to welcome me properly to the community, though I've been here nearly 6 months already." Adam hadn't planned on it. Town socials meant uncomfortable clothes, making conversation with people he barely knew, and inevitably, well-meaning widows trying to introduce him to their daughters or nieces. "I hadn't thought about it," he hedged. "You should come," she pressed. "The whole community will be there, and it would be good for you to meet people. A ranch can't thrive in isolation." Before Adam could form a reply, Daniel returned, and Diana mounted her horse again. "I'll leave you men to your work," she said. "Daniel, I'll see you in town on Sunday for dinner." After she had ridden away, Adam found himself watching her retreating figure longer than necessary. There was something about Diana Lockhart that disturbed the careful isolation he had constructed around himself. She made him think of his mother's words, "Find happiness too." But happiness was a distraction he couldn't afford, not when the ranch demanded everything he had. Love had no place in the life he had chosen. The frontier had taught him that much. Over the next weeks, Adam was surprised to find that Daniel Lockhart was indeed a quick learner and a hard worker. What he lacked in experience, he made up for in dedication and a willingness to take on the dirtiest, most difficult tasks without complaint. "You're picking this up faster than I expected," Adam admitted one evening as they sat by the fire outside the main house, eating the stew Adam had prepared. Daniel smiled, the scar on his face pulling slightly. "Teaching school was never going to suit me, not after the war. This feels more real." "Your sister seems to think teaching is her calling," Adam observed, trying to sound casual. "Diana has always known her own mind," Daniel replied with obvious affection. Our parents wanted her to make a suitable marriage back in Boston, but she was determined to forge her own path. When the opportunity came to teach out west, she took it without hesitation. Adam pondered this. In his experience, Eastern women rarely chose the hardships of frontier life voluntarily. She must be brave. Stubborn is the word I'd use, Daniel laughed. Speaking of Diana, she asked me again if you're planning to attend the social on Saturday. Adam frowned. I've got work here. The cattle won't disappear if you take one evening off, Daniel pointed out reasonably. Besides, Diana mentioned that several of the larger ranchers will be there. Might be a good chance to make connections. Adam knew Daniel had a point. Isolated as they were, making connections with other ranchers could be valuable. Still, the thought of an evening of socializing made him uncomfortable. I'll think about it, he conceded finally. Saturday arrived clear and warm, a perfect late spring day. Adam found himself, against his better judgment, shaving carefully and donning his one good shirt and the suit coat that had belonged to his father. It was slightly too small across the shoulders now, but it was the best he had. Daniel looked surprised when Adam emerged from the house. Well, now you clean up better than I would have guessed, he teased. The social was being held in the town hall, a relatively new building that served multiple purposes in Silver Creek. When Adam and Daniel arrived, it was already crowded with townspeople and ranchers from the surrounding area. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting a warm glow over the proceedings, and someone was playing a fiddle in the corner while couples danced. Adam felt immediately out of place. He nodded greetings to people he recognized, but kept to the edges of the room, watching rather than participating. It was while he was contemplating making an early exit that Diana Lockhart found him. Mr. Thornton, she said, approaching with a smile, I'm so glad you decided to come. Adam's carefully rehearsed casual greeting died on his lips as he took in her appearance. Diana wore a dress of deep blue that brought out the warmth of her brown eyes and honey-colored hair, which was arranged in an elegant knot at the nape of her neck. She looked every inch the proper Eastern lady, yet there was still that directness in her gaze that set her apart. Miss Lockhart, he managed finally, it's a fine gathering. And yet you're hiding in the corner, she observed with a slight smile. Come, let me introduce you to some people, Mr. Peterson tells me you're looking to expand your herd. Before Adam could protest, Diana had taken his arm and was guiding him toward a group of men engaged in conversation. He recognized James Miller, owner of the largest ranch in the territory, and beside him stood two other substantial landowners. Gentlemen, Diana said confidently, may I introduce Adam Thornton? He ranches the old Davidson place west of town. Miller, a gruff man in his 50s, looked Adam over with interest. Thornton, your father was Robert Thornton, wasn't he? Served with him briefly during the war. Yes, sir, Adam replied, surprised. You knew my father. Good man, steady under fire, Miller nodded. Heard he didn't make it back. Gettysburg, Adam confirmed quietly. And your mother passed this winter, I believe, Miller continued. Peterson mentioned it, my condolences. Thank you, sir. So you're running the place alone now? Asked one of the other ranchers. With some help, Adam replied, nodding toward where Daniel stood talking with a group of younger people. But yes, essentially. The conversation turned to cattle prices and grazing rights, topics Adam was comfortable discussing. To his surprise, Diana remained by his side, occasionally contributing to the conversation with well-informed questions or observations that made the older men look at her with new respect. Later, as the evening was winding down, Adam found himself once again alone with Diana near the refreshment table. Thank you, he said quietly, for the introductions. Diana smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes. You're welcome. Mr. Miller mentioned they're planning a cooperative cattle drive to the railhead in July. It might be worth joining them. Adam nodded thoughtfully. It would save considerably on costs. Exactly, Diana agreed. No ranch is an island, Mr. Thornton. Even out here we need each other. There was something in the way she said it, looking directly at him with those warm brown eyes, that made Adam feel as though she was speaking about more than just ranching. Would you care to dance, Miss Lockhart? The words were out before he could consider them properly. Surprise flickered across her face, followed by pleasure. I would like that very much. The musicians were playing a waltz, and as Adam led Diana onto the floor, he was acutely aware that he hadn't danced since before the war. But his body remembered the steps, and Diana moved with a natural grace that made it easy to guide her through the turns. "You dance well for a rancher," she observed with a slight smile. "My mother insisted I learn," Adam admitted. She said no son of hers would grow up without knowing how to be a gentleman, frontier or no frontier. "She sounds like a wise woman." She was, Adam agreed, a familiar pang of grief tightening his chest. "She never quite belonged out here, but she made the best of it for my father's sake. And then for mine." "And what about you, Mr. Thornton?" Diana asked. "Do you belong out here?" The question caught him off guard. "I don't know anywhere else," he said finally. "This land, the ranch, it's all I have left of them." Diana's expression softened with understanding. "I think there's more to you than just your parents' legacy, Adam Thornton." The use of his first name, spoken softly in the midst of the dancing couples, seemed to create a moment of intimacy that both thrilled and alarmed him. The waltz ended and Adam stepped back, suddenly needing distance. "Thank you for the dance, Miss Lockhart," he said formally, bowing slightly, "and for the introductions earlier. I should find your brother. It's getting late, and we have an early start tomorrow." A flash of disappointment crossed Diana's face, but she nodded gracefully. "Of course. Thank you for the dance, Mr. Thornton." As Adam drove the wagon back to the ranch, Daniel riding alongside on his horse, he found his thoughts returning again and again to the feeling of Diana Lockhart in his arms during that waltz. There had been something there, a connection he hadn't experienced before. "You and my sister seem to be getting along well," Daniel observed casually. "Miss Lockhart is not what I expected from an Eastern schoolteacher," Adam admitted. Daniel laughed. "Diana has never been what anyone expected. That's her gift and occasionally her curse." Adam fell silent, considering this. Diana Lockhart represented everything he had convinced himself he didn't need or want. Complication, distraction, the possibility of loss. The frontier was no place for the kind of feelings she stirred in him. He had a ranch to save, a promise to keep. Love had no place in that equation. June brought long days of backbreaking work as Adam and Daniel prepared for the summer roundup. True to Diana's prediction, James Miller had extended an invitation for Adam to join the cooperative cattle drive to the railhead, an opportunity that could mean the difference between barely surviving another year and actually beginning to prosper. "You've got good stock," Miller had commented during a visit to Adam's ranch. "Smaller herd than I'd like to see, but quality animals. Join us for the drive, save on costs, and use the extra money to expand next year." It was sound advice, and Adam had accepted gratefully. But the cattle drive meant weeks away from the ranch during the height of summer, a risk, but a calculated one. "I can manage things here," Daniel assured him when Adam expressed concern. "Between me and the boy from town you're hiring, we'll keep everything running." Adam nodded, trusting Daniel's judgment more with each passing day. In just a few months, the former soldier had proven himself invaluable, learning the rhythms of ranch life with a dedication that impressed even the most experienced hands they occasionally hired for specific tasks. "I appreciate it," Adam said sincerely. "This drive could change everything for the ranch." What he didn't say was that the prospect of several weeks away from Silver Creek, and away from Diana Lockhart, came as something of a relief. Since the social, he had found himself inventing reasons to go into town more frequently, always with the hope of catching a glimpse of her. Twice he had attended Sunday services, something he hadn't done since his mother's funeral, and both times he had lingered afterward to exchange a few words with Diana. Each encounter left him more unsettled than the last. There was something about her combination of Eastern refinement and frontier practicality that fascinated him. She was educated but not condescending, proper but not rigid, and there was a quiet strength to her that reminded him of his mother. But whenever these thoughts threatened to take root, Adam ruthlessly pruned them back. The last thing he needed was to lose focus now, when the ranch's future hung in the balance. His mother's dying wish had been for him to keep the ranch and find happiness, but Adam was convinced that only the first part of that wish was within his reach. The day before Adam was to leave for the cattle drive, Daniel announced that Diana had invited them both to Sunday dinner in town. "I told her you're leaving tomorrow," Daniel explained, "and she insisted on feeding us properly before you go. Said no man should start a cattle drive on his own cooking." Adam hesitated, knowing he should refuse but unable to deny himself one last glimpse of Diana before weeks on the trail. "That's kind of her," he said finally. "Tell her we accept." Diana lived in a small but neat house near the schoolhouse, rented from one of the town's founding families. When Adam and Daniel arrived, the scent of roasting beef and fresh bread greeted them, making Adam realize how long it had been since he'd eaten food prepared by someone who truly knew how to cook. "Welcome," Diana said warmly as she opened the door. Her honey-colored hair was arranged simply today, with just a few tendrils framing her face, and she wore a simple green dress with a white apron. "Please come in." The interior of the house reflected Diana herself, ordered but welcoming, with small touches that spoke of her Eastern background alongside practical frontier necessities. Books lined a small shelf in the parlor, and a vase of wildflowers brightened the dining table. "Something smells wonderful," Daniel commented, kissing his sister's cheek. "Roast beef, potatoes, and I managed to get some early vegetables from Mrs. Peterson's garden," Diana replied, "and apple pie for dessert." "You didn't have to go to such trouble," Adam said, feeling suddenly awkward in her home, aware of the mud he'd tried unsuccessfully to clean from his boots. Diana's smile was warm. "It's no trouble. Besides, it's not every day a man sets off on a cattle drive that could change his fortunes." The meal was the best Adam had eaten since his mother's death. Diana was an excellent cook, and the conversation flowed easily among the three of them. Daniel shared stories from their childhood in Boston that made Diana laugh and protest, while she countered with tales of his misadventures that made Adam see his ranch hand in a new light. "And what about you, Mr. Thornton?" Diana asked as she served the apple pie. "Daniel tells me you fought in the war as well, though you must have been very young." Adam nodded, cutting a piece of the flaky pastry. "I was 16 when I joined up in 67. Lied about my age. Saw mostly Reconstruction duty, not much fighting by then." "Still at 16, Diana mused. "Was it because of your father?" Adam looked up, surprised by her perception. "Partly. He died at Gettysburg in 63, and I'd spent 4 years watching my mother struggle alone. Thought if I joined up I could make a difference somehow. Send money home." "Did you?" she asked quietly. "Some," Adam acknowledged. "Not enough to change things much. By the time I came home in 69, the ranch was barely hanging on." "And yet you stayed," Diana observed, "took on the responsibility." "It was my father's dream," Adam said simply. "And my mother's home, where else would I go?" Diana studied him thoughtfully. "There's more to life than obligation, Mr. Thornton." "Is there?" Adam countered. "Out here, obligation is what keeps people alive. Duty to your land, your family, your word." "I don't disagree," Diana replied, "but duty without joy becomes a prison of one's own making." Her words struck too close to the promise Adam had made his mother, to keep the ranch and find happiness. As if sensing his discomfort, Diana changed the subject, asking about the upcoming cattle drive instead. Later, as they prepared to leave, Diana pressed a package into Adam's hands. "Some food for your first day on the trail," she explained, "and a book if you find yourself with a quiet moment." Adam accepted the package, their fingers brushing briefly. "Thank you, Miss Lockhart." "For everything." Diana looked up at him, her brown eyes serious. "Be safe, Adam, and remember what I said about duty and joy. They need not be mutually exclusive." The cattle drive began at dawn the following day, with 6 ranchers combining their herds for the long journey to the railhead. Adam's contribution was modest, 60 head of cattle compared to Miller's 300, but the older rancher treated him as an equal, assigning him responsibility for a section of the herd and consulting him on decisions. The work was hard and the days long, but Adam found a rhythm in it, a purpose that felt right. At night, exhausted but satisfied, he would sometimes take out the book Diana had given him, a collection of poetry by Whitman, and read by firelight, hearing her voice in the words about the beauty and harshness of America. It was during the 3rd week of the drive, as they were crossing a particularly treacherous stretch of river, that disaster struck. A sudden thunderstorm had swollen the normally fordable river to dangerous levels, but with no suitable camping spot nearby and supplies running low, Miller had made the decision to attempt the crossing. "Keep them moving steady," Miller instructed as the men positioned themselves around the herd. "Don't let them bunch up in the water." Adam took his position on the right flank, guiding his horse into the swift current alongside the cattle. The water was cold and fast, reaching halfway up his horse's legs as they waded in. The cattle moved reluctantly, lowing in distress as the current pushed against them. Halfway across, Adam heard a shout from upstream. One of the younger hands had lost control of his horse, which was being swept sideways by the current, panicking and thrashing. The commotion spooked a section of the herd, and suddenly cattle were turning, losing their footing, being carried downstream. Without hesitation, Adam urged his horse deeper into the river, toward the struggling hand. The young man, barely 18, was clinging desperately to his saddle as his horse fought the current. "Hold on," Adam shouted over the roar of the water and the bellowing of frightened cattle. He maneuvered his own mount alongside the panicked horse, grabbing its bridle and helping to turn its head toward the far shore. They were almost there, the bank tantalizingly close, when Adam's horse stepped into an unseen hole in the riverbed. The animal stumbled, throwing Adam forward over its neck and into the rushing water. The cold shocked the breath from his lungs as the current instantly seized him, tumbling him downstream away from his horse, away from the herd. Adam fought to keep his head above water, but his heavy clothes and boots dragged him down. A fallen tree loomed in the water ahead, and with desperate strength he lunged for it, managing to grasp a branch. The force of the water slammed him against the trunk, sending pain shooting through his left side. Clinging to the tree, Adam tried to pull himself toward the shore, but each movement sent fresh agony through what he now suspected were broken ribs. The cold water numbed his limbs, making it harder to hold on as minutes stretched agonizingly. From somewhere downstream came shouts and the sound of horses. Miller and two other men appeared on the bank, one already stripping off his gun belt and preparing to enter the water. "Hold on, Thornton," Miller called. "Johnson's coming for you." The rescue was a blur of pain and cold. Johnson, a former Navy man, managed to reach Adam and help him to shore, where the others pulled them both to safety. Adam collapsed on the muddy bank, coughing up river water and shivering uncontrollably. "Ribs," he gasped when Miller knelt beside him. "Think they're broken." Miller nodded grimly. "Johnson, ride ahead to the next town. There's a doctor there. Tell him we're coming with an injured man." "The herd," Adam began. "Is mostly across," Miller assured him. "We lost maybe 15 head, could have been worse. You saved that boy's life, Thornton." Adam closed his eyes against the pain. "My horse." "Made it across." Carter caught him. Despite the agony in his side, Adam felt relief. A horse was his livelihood out here, as important as the cattle themselves. The journey to the town was an exercise in endurance. Every jolt of the wagon they'd rigged as a makeshift ambulance sent fresh waves of pain through Adam's body. By the time they reached the small settlement, fever had set in, and Adam drifted in and out of consciousness. The town doctor confirmed 3 broken ribs and worried about lung fever developing. "He needs rest," the doctor told Miller. "Weeks of it. He can't continue the drive." "I'll stay with him," Miller decided. "The others can continue with the herd. Once he's stable enough to travel, I'll get him back to Silver Creek." Through the haze of pain and fever, Adam protested. "Can't ask you to do that. Your herd is in good hands," Miller cut him off. "Consider it payment for saving my nephew's life. That boy you pulled out of the river is my sister's son." Adam hadn't known, hadn't made the connection between the young hand Johnson and the formidable rancher. "Didn't do it for that reason," he murmured. Miller's weathered face softened. "I know, son, that's why I'm doing this." The fever worsened before it broke. For days, Adam drifted through nightmares and memories. His father leaving for war, his mother's final days, and strangely, Diana Lockhart's face, her voice telling him that duty and joy need not be mutually exclusive. When consciousness finally returned fully, Adam found Miller sitting beside his bed, reading a newspaper. "Welcome back," the older man said, folding the paper. "You had us worried." Adam's mouth was dry, his voice a croak. "How long?" "5 days," Miller replied, pouring a glass of water and helping Adam drink. "Fever broke yesterday. Doctor says you're past the worst of it." Adam sank back against the pillows, exhausted by even this small effort. "The herd should be reaching the railhead today or tomorrow," Miller said. "Johnson sent a telegram. They've lost no more cattle." Relief washed through Adam, followed by a crushing realization. My cattle, I can't be there to negotiate the sale. Already taken care of, Miller said calmly. I gave Johnson written authority to act on both our behalves. He has instructions to get you the best possible price. The boy feels responsible for what happened, though it wasn't his fault. Adam closed his eyes, overwhelmed by the older man's kindness. Thank you. Rest now, Miller advised, standing. The doctor says if you continue to improve, we can start the journey back to Silver Creek in about a week. As Miller moved toward the door, Adam called after him, Why are you doing all this? The truth. Miller paused, his hand on the doorknob. Because 20 years ago I was you, young, stubborn, trying to build something from nothing. The difference was I had help, a neighbor who stepped in when I needed it most. He looked back at Adam. Out here a man doesn't survive alone. Remember that, Thornton. The journey back to Silver Creek took 3 days, with frequent stops to allow Adam to rest. His ribs ached constantly, but the fever had not returned, and each day brought a little more strength back to his body. As they approached the familiar outline of the town, Adam found himself thinking of Diana. Would she have heard about the accident? Would she care? The thought that she might have worried about him brought a strange comfort. Miller drove the wagon directly to the doctor's office in town. You should stay here a couple more days, he advised as he helped Adam down. Let the doc check you over before you head back to the ranch. Adam nodded, too tired to argue. I need to send word to Daniel. Let him know I'm back. Already done, Miller said. Sent a telegram from the last town. Expect he'll be in to see you soon. True to Miller's prediction, Daniel arrived within hours, his face tight with concern that relaxed somewhat when he saw Adam sitting up in the doctor's examining room. You look terrible, Daniel observed bluntly. Adam managed a weak smile. Good to see you too. Diana's been worried sick, Daniel continued, taking a seat beside the bed. When word came about the accident, she wanted to ride out to that town immediately. Took some convincing to make her see reason. The thought of Diana being so concerned warmed something inside Adam. The ranch, he asked, changing the subject. Running smoothly, Daniel assured him. Hired that Wilkins boy to help out. He's young but works hard. Adam nodded, relieved. And the money from the cattle. Johnson sent it with a letter explaining everything. We did well, Adam. Better than expected. There's enough to get through winter comfortably and still expand the herd come spring. The news should have brought pure joy, but Adam found it tempered by a strange emptiness. He had achieved what he'd set out to do, secured the ranch's future for another year at least. Yet lying here miles from home, he found himself thinking not of cattle prices or expanded herds, but of honey-colored hair and warm brown eyes. Daniel, Adam said suddenly, would you ask your sister if she might visit? If it's not too much trouble. Daniel's expression shifted to one of knowing satisfaction. I think she'd like that very much. Diana arrived the following morning, a basket over her arm and concern evident in her face. She paused in the doorway of the small room where Adam was recovering, her eyes taking in his appearance, the pallor beneath his tan, the careful way he held himself to avoid jarring his ribs. You're supposed to bring cattle to market, she said with forced lightness, not yourself to death's door. Adam felt an unexpected smile tugging at his lips. I'll remember that next time. Diana moved into the room, setting her basket on the small table. I brought some bread I baked this morning and preserves. Hospital food is never adequate. Thank you, Adam said sincerely, watching as she efficiently unpacked her offerings. There was something comforting about her presence, a steadiness that seemed to fill the barren room. Daniel says you'll make a full recovery, she continued, her back to him as she arranged the food. The doctor agrees, Adam confirmed. Though it will be weeks before I can do any real work. Diana turned to face him, her expression serious. Then you'll need help at the ranch. Daniel has been managing well, Adam said. And we've hired a local boy. Even so, you'll need proper meals and someone to change those bandages, Diana insisted. I've spoken with the school board. Summer session doesn't begin for another 3 weeks. I can come to the ranch until then. Adam stared at her, taken aback by the offer. That's not necessary. It is entirely necessary, Diana cut him off firmly. Unless you prefer to stay in town until you're fully recovered. The thought of weeks in this small room was unbearable. No, but... Then it's settled, Diana said with the air of someone used to organizing reluctant schoolchildren. Daniel will bring you home tomorrow, and I'll follow with my things the day after. Adam wanted to protest further, to insist he would manage, but the truth was that the prospect of Diana's presence at the ranch brought more comfort than he cared to admit. "Thank you," he said instead. "It's very generous of you." Diana's expression softened. "It's what neighbors do, Adam, help each other when needed." She hesitated, then added more quietly, "I was very worried when we heard about the accident." "I'm sorry," Adam said, not quite knowing what he was apologizing for, the worry he had caused her, or the fact that her concern meant so much to him. Diana looked at him for a long moment, her brown eyes searching his face. "I'm just glad you're safe," she said finally. "Now you should eat something before this bread gets cold." As promised, Daniel brought Adam home the following day, settling him in the main house with careful attention to his comfort. The ranch looked good, fences mended, cattle grazing contentedly in the summer pastures, the vegetable garden behind the house thriving. "You've done well," Adam told Daniel as they sat on the porch that evening, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of gold and purple. Daniel nodded, accepting the compliment without false modesty. "It's good land, just needs the right care." Adam sipped the coffee Daniel had made, thinking of his parents, of the promise he had made. "It was my father's dream," he said after a moment, "to build something lasting here." "And now it's yours," Daniel observed, though perhaps not in the same way. Adam glanced at him questioningly. "Your father's dream was shaped by his time, his circumstances," Daniel explained. "Yours doesn't have to be identical. The land remains, but what you build on it, that can be your own vision." The words resonated with something Diana had said about duty and joy not being mutually exclusive. Before Adam could respond, however, the sound of an approaching wagon drew their attention. "That will be Diana," Daniel said, rising. "A day early, but that's my sister for you." Always adjusting plans to suit herself. Sure enough, Diana was driving a small wagon, loaded with what appeared to be an impressive amount of luggage for a 3-week stay. She reined in before the house, her face lighting with a smile when she saw Adam on the porch. "You're looking better already," she called as Daniel moved to help her down. Adam stood carefully, mindful of his ribs. "The prospect of home cooking will do that to a man," he replied with a smile of his own. The next days established a routine that was both strange and oddly comforting to Adam. Diana took over the kitchen with easy efficiency, producing meals that made the simple fare Adam and Daniel had subsisted on seem like prison rations by comparison. She changed Adam's bandages with gentle hands, scolded him when he tried to do too much too soon, and in the evenings, read aloud from one of the books she had brought while the three of them sat on the porch. A week into this arrangement, Adam found himself watching Diana as she worked in the kitchen, humming softly to herself while kneading bread dough. Sunlight streamed through the window, catching in her honey-colored hair and illuminating her profile. There was a contentment in her movements, a belonging that seemed to defy her Eastern upbringing. "You seem at home here," he observed. Diana looked up, a smudge of flour on her cheek. "Do I?" "More than I would have expected from a Boston schoolteacher," Adam admitted. Diana smiled, returning to her kneading. "Boston never quite fit me right. My mother despaired of ever making me into a proper society lady." "And yet you're educated, cultured," Adam pointed out. "You could have had an easier life there." "Easier perhaps, but not my own." Diana shaped the dough into a loaf with practiced movements. "Out here I'm valued for what I can contribute, my knowledge, my abilities, not for who my family is or who I might marry." Adam considered this. "Your brother said something similar about why he came west." "The war changed Daniel," Diana said, her expression sobering. "He came home a different man than the boy who left. Boston society had no place for his scars, both the visible ones and those he carries inside." "And you?" Adam asked quietly. "What brought you west, really?" Diana was silent for a moment, wiping her hands on her apron. "Freedom," she said finally, "the freedom to define myself by my own terms." She looked up at him, her gaze direct. "Isn't that what the frontier offers all of us, the chance to create ourselves anew?" The question lingered in Adam's mind long after Diana had put the bread in the oven and moved on to other tasks. Had he truly created himself anew out here, or was he simply trying to preserve what had come before? His father's dream, his mother's wishes. How much of what he did was for them, and how much for himself? That night, unable to sleep, Adam made his way carefully to the porch, hoping the cool night air might clear his thoughts. To his surprise, Diana was already there, wrapped in a shawl and gazing at the star-filled sky. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked without turning. "Pain wakes me sometimes," Adam admitted, easing himself into a chair beside her. "I could prepare a willow bark tea," she offered. "It might help." "This helps more," Adam said, gesturing to the vast expanse of stars above them. "Reminds me how small our troubles are in the grand scheme." Diana smiled. A philosopher as well as a rancher. Hardly, Adam chuckled, then winced as the movement jarred his ribs. Just a man who spent too many nights under these stars not to be humbled by them. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the night sounds of the ranch, distant cattle, the occasional owl, the whisper of wind through grass, creating a peaceful backdrop. "I've been thinking about what you said," Adam said finally, "about duty and joy not being mutually exclusive." Diana turned to look at him, her face silver in the moonlight. "And my mother made me promise two things before she died," Adam explained. "To keep the ranch and to find happiness. I've always thought I could only fulfill one of those promises." "Because happiness seemed impossible on the frontier," Diana guessed. "Because happiness seemed like a luxury I couldn't afford," Adam corrected gently. "Every day was about survival, about keeping my word to keep this place going." Diana was quiet for a moment. "And now? Now I'm not so sure," Adam admitted. "These past weeks with you here," he hesitated, suddenly unsure of himself. "The ranch feels different, like it could be more than just my parents' legacy. Like it could be a home." The word hung between them, heavy with meaning. Diana reached out slowly and laid her hand over his on the arm of the chair. "I think that would make your mother very happy," she said softly. Adam turned his hand to hold hers, a simple connection that somehow felt more significant than any words they might have spoken. They remained that way for a long time, watching the stars wheel overhead, hands joined in silent understanding. The days that followed took on a different quality, a sense of possibility that had been absent before. Adam found himself looking forward not just to Diana's cooking or her care, but to her conversation, her perspective, the way she saw the world differently than he did, yet often arrived at the same conclusions. His strength returned gradually, and soon he was able to take short walks around the ranch, inspecting the work Daniel and young Wilkins were doing, offering advice when asked but more often just observing. "You're different," Daniel commented one afternoon as they checked a section of fence together. "Less driven." Adam considered this. "Maybe I'm learning there's more to life than just pushing through each day." Daniel glanced toward the house, where Diana could be seen hanging laundry on the line. "My sister tends to have that effect on people." Adam didn't deny it. "She's remarkable." "She is," Daniel agreed, "and in 3 days she returns to town for the summer session." The reminder landed like a stone in Adam's stomach. Somehow in the comfortable routine they had established, he had managed to avoid thinking about Diana's departure. The ranch would feel empty without her presence, her laughter, the small touches she had added to the house, wildflowers on the table, curtains at the windows, books arranged on a previously empty shelf. "You could ask her to stay," Daniel suggested quietly. Adam looked at him sharply. "As what, a housekeeper?" Daniel gave him a look that suggested he thought Adam was being deliberately obtuse. "As whatever you both want her to be." That night Adam found Diana again on the porch, this time with one of her books open on her lap, though she didn't appear to be reading it. "May I join you?" he asked. Diana smiled up at him. "Of course, how are you feeling?" "Better," Adam said, taking the seat beside her. "Almost human again." "The doctor said it would be at least 6 weeks before you're fully healed," Diana reminded him. "Don't push yourself too hard when I'm gone." The mention of her departure created an opening Adam knew he needed to take. "About that," he began, then faltered, unsure how to continue. Diana closed her book, giving him her full attention. "Yes. These weeks," Adam said carefully, "having you here, it's made me see things differently." "In what way?" Diana's voice was equally careful, as if she too was aware of standing at some crucial threshold. Adam looked out at the land, his land stretching away into the darkness. I've been holding on to this ranch because I promised my mother I would. It was my duty, my obligation. I never thought about whether it could be more than that. And now, Diana prompted when he paused. Now I'm beginning to think it could be a place of both duty and joy, Adam said, turning to look at her directly. But only if, he stopped, gathered his courage. Only if you were part of it. Diana's breath caught audibly. Adam. I'm not asking for an answer now, he hurried to add. I know it's sudden and you have your teaching, your independence. I wanted you to know how I feel before you leave. Diana was silent for a long moment, looking out at the darkened ranch. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful. When I came west, I was running from the constraints of Boston society, from the expectation that my only value was in whom I might marry. I wanted to make my own way, on my own terms. Adam nodded, a weight settling in his chest. I understand. No, Diana said gently, turning back to him. I don't think you do. I was afraid that any man who showed interest in me would want to put me back in that constrained role. But you, she smiled, a tenderness in her expression that made Adam's heart race. You see me as I am, you value my mind, my abilities, my independence. Of course I do, Adam said, surprised. That's who you are. Diana reached for his hand, her fingers warm against his. I can't give you an answer tonight, but I can tell you that the thought of leaving this ranch, leaving you, has been harder than I expected. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. Adam felt hope unfurl within him, fragile but real. Take the time you need, he said. I'll be here. 2 days later, Daniel drove Diana back to town for the start of the summer session. Adam stood on the porch, watching until the wagon disappeared from sight, then turned back to the empty house that somehow no longer felt like home without her presence. The next week stretched long and quiet. Adam's strength returned steadily, and soon he was able to take on light work around the ranch. The money from the cattle drive had indeed been better than expected, allowing him to hire another permanent hand and begin planning for the expansion of the herd. Each Sunday, he rode into town for church services, where he would exchange brief words with Diana before social obligations pulled her away. She was always warm, always pleased to see him, but the question between them remained unanswered. It was on the 4th such Sunday that Diana approached him after the service, a determined look in her eyes. "Would you walk with me, Mr. Thornton?" she asked formally, aware of the curious gazes of townspeople around them. Adam offered his arm and they strolled away from the church toward the small town park. When they were relatively private, Diana spoke. "I've been thinking about your question," she said without preamble. Adam's heart quickened. And I have a question of my own first," Diana replied. "If I were to say yes, what would that mean for my teaching?" It wasn't the response Adam had expected, but he considered it seriously. "That would be for you to decide," he said finally. "The ranch is 10 miles from town, but not impossible to travel daily if you wish to continue." Diana looked surprised. "You wouldn't expect me to give it up." "I would expect you to do what fulfills you," Adam said simply, "whether that's teaching or the ranch or both in some measure." Diana studied his face, as if searching for any sign of insincerity. "Most men would want their wife at home, tending to domestic duties." "I'm not most men," Adam pointed out. "And you're not most women. Whatever arrangement we make, it has to work for both of us." A slow smile spread across Diana's face. "That's the right answer, Adam Thornton." "Does that mean—" "It means," Diana interrupted, "that I would be honored to consider your proposal. But I have one condition." "Name it," Adam said immediately. "I want to continue teaching through the fall term," Diana said. "I made a commitment to these children and their families. I won't break it." Adam nodded, understanding. "Of course." "And after that—" Diana's expression softened. "After that, I think I might be ready for a new chapter, one that includes a certain ranch and a certain rancher who has shown me that duty and joy can indeed coexist." Adam wanted nothing more than to take her in his arms then, but they were still in view of half the town. Instead, he took her hand and pressed it gently. "Diana Lockhart, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife when your teaching commitment is fulfilled?" "Yes," Diana said simply, her brown eyes shining. "Yes, I will." The news of their engagement spread quickly through Silver Creek. Most reactions were positive. Diana was respected as a teacher, and Adam's recent partnership with James Miller had raised his standing in the community. There were a few raised eyebrows at the arrangement for Diana to continue teaching through the fall, but as Diana pointed out privately to Adam, those who matter don't mind, and those who mind don't matter. The wedding was set for December, after the school term ended. In the meantime, Adam threw himself into preparing the ranch for its new mistress. With Daniel's help and the additional hands, they expanded the main house, adding a proper parlor and a second bedroom. Adam ordered furniture from Denver, a new bed, a writing desk for Diana, bookshelves for her growing collection. Diana visited on weekends, sometimes staying with a proper chaperone in the form of Mrs. Peterson, who had taken a grandmotherly interest in the couple. Together, they planned and dreamed, talking late into the evening about the future they would build. "I want to start a small school eventually," Diana confided one such evening as they sat before the fire. "Just for the children of the surrounding ranches who can't get to town easily, perhaps one day a week to start." Adam nodded, imagining children's voices filling the ranch that had been silent for too long. "We could convert the old bunkhouse. It's solid, just needs some work." Diana leaned against his shoulder, content. "You don't think I'm being too ambitious?" "I think," Adam said, pressing a kiss to her honey-colored hair, "that your ambition is one of the many things I love about you." The fall cattle roundup was successful, further cementing the ranch's improving fortunes. James Miller, who had become something of a mentor to Adam, pronounced himself satisfied with Adam's management. "You've done well, son," he said as they shared a whiskey on Adam's porch after a long day of work. "Your father would be proud." "Thank you," Adam said, meaning it. "For everything you've done. I wouldn't be here without your help." Miller waved this away. "You would have found your way. But I'm glad I could smooth the path a bit." He took a sip of his whiskey, contemplative. "That's a fine woman you're marrying. Reminds me of my Martha when we were young, has her own mind, not afraid to speak it." "Diana is remarkable," Adam agreed. "I still can't quite believe she chose me." Miller chuckled. "I can. You've got more to offer than you realize, Thornton, not just this land, but what's in here." He tapped his chest over his heart. "You're a good man." "Those are rarer than you might think." As December approached, bringing with it the end of the school term and the impending wedding, Adam found himself reflecting on the promise he had made to his mother nearly a year before. Keep the ranch. Find happiness. Standing on the porch of the home he had expanded and improved, looking out over land that was now truly thriving under his care, Adam felt a sense of fulfillment that went beyond mere duty. The ranch was no longer just his father's dream that he was obligated to maintain. It had become his own vision, a place where he could build a future with the woman he loved. The day of the wedding dawned clear and cold, a perfect Montana winter day with snow blanketing the landscape and the sky an impossible blue. The ceremony was held in the Silver Creek Church, filled to capacity with townspeople and ranchers from miles around. Daniel stood as Adam's best man, his face showing genuine happiness for his sister and the man who had become both employer and friend. When Diana appeared at the back of the church on the arm of James Miller, who had offered to give her away, Adam felt his breath catch. She wore a dress of deep ivory satin, her honey-colored hair arranged with sprigs of evergreen and winter berries. But it was her face that captivated him, radiant with joy, her brown eyes finding his immediately across the crowded church. The vows were simple, traditional, yet spoken with a depth of feeling that moved many in the congregation to tears. When the minister pronounced them man and wife, Adam kissed his bride with gentle reverence, sealing a promise that went beyond the words they had just spoken. The celebration afterward was held at the Silver Creek Hotel, where the dining room had been transformed with evergreen boughs and candles. There was music and dancing, food and drink, and through it all, Adam found himself returning again and again to the same thought. This is happiness. Later, as they drove through the moonlit snow toward the ranch, their ranch now, truly, Diana nestled against him beneath the heavy blankets in the sleigh. "Happy?" she asked, looking up at him with trust and love in her eyes. Adam thought of his mother's final request, of the promise he had made and how differently it had been fulfilled than he had ever imagined. "Completely," he answered, and knew it was true. The ranch came into view, windows glowing with the welcoming lights that Daniel had promised to leave burning for their return. It looked different somehow. not just because of the physical improvements Adam had made over the past months, but because it was no longer a symbol of obligation. It was home. As Adam helped Diana down from the sleigh and carried her across the threshold of their house, he felt the last piece of his mother's wish fall into place. He had kept the ranch, yes. But more importantly, he had found happiness, not despite the frontier, but because of it, and because of the remarkable woman who had taught him that duty and joy need not be mutually exclusive. That night, as Diana slept peacefully beside him, Adam looked out at the moonlight on the snow and whispered a quiet thank you to his parents. For the legacy they had left him, for the promise that had guided him, and for whatever hand fate had played in bringing Diana Lockhart into his life. The frontier had taught Adam Thornton that survival required strength, determination, and sometimes isolation. But Diana had taught him that true living required connection, vulnerability, and love. Together they would build a life that honored both truths, a life of purpose and passion, duty and joy, promise and possibility. And in that, Adam had found a happiness more complete than he had ever dared to imagine.